third speaker has been named one of the world's 10 most influential intellectuals by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's an author, documentarian, and he studies human autonomy in the digital age. His most recently published of his 20 books is titled Survival of the Richest, Escape Fantasies of the Tech Billionaires. I've got to read this. Please welcome Douglas Rushkoff.
Hey, thanks for having me. So straight into it, because we only got 10 minutes. I mean, what's left, I think, in answer to previous speaker, what's left is the process. So yes, Chat GPT or one of these things can make the song or write and record the critical analysis of something. But as I see it, the primary value of critical analysis is the process of critical analysis. The primary value of songwriting is the emergence of the song among the people in living space. And that's really what it means as I understand it. And I wrote a book before that one called Team Human, really looking at what does it mean to be human in a digital age. And the way I often start when I'm talking about AI and automation is to say, oh, first they came for the cab drivers. And I said nothing because I'm not a cab driver, and then there was no one, by the time they came for me. And the problem with that construction around automation, that it's coming and taking each of our jobs, is it's not replacing us as people. What it's doing is it's replacing people. We're talking about AI replacing the functions of people, right? People's functions being replaced by technology. Yet, since when do we understand humans in terms of their functions, right? That's the digital media environment's definition of humans, right? We have utility value, we have functions, but that's not what it means to be human. And I think the reason I am optimistic is that AI finally is a clear enough example of a human-like technology to help people see what technology has been doing since technology was technology. That initial impulse of technology, as Francis Bacon might say, to take nature by the forelock, hold her down and submit her to our will, right? To the digital impulse to make the world more tameable and colonizable. And in our case today, the digital impulse to make human beings more digital. And you think about auto-tuning. There's a current accepted aesthetic in the music recording is you take Ariana Grande and get her from to and get her note just perfectly on the quantized 440 hertz A note. And I understand when you're creating product, you want it perfect. But what about auto-tuning James Brown or Tina Turner when they're reaching up for that note? They're reaching up for that note, the being off that note until they're on it or even above it. That's the human interpretation of the song. That's not it. What technologists will call that being off the note, they call that noise. Right? And as a humanist, I call that the signal. The song is the same for everybody. The signal I am getting from James Brown, from Tina Turner, is that reaching up. That's literally the soul of the music and the part that's not recognized on the quantized beats. It's that in-between place. You think about the computer, the digital understanding of time is the ticks of the clock. The human experience of time is the duration between the ticks that the computer doesn't even see. So when I look back on the psychedelic, on the digital, the emergence of digital technology, I think of it as an essentially psychedelic phenomenon. That's where it came from. That's who was making this stuff. And the original set and setting, as it were, the context of the digital renaissance was unleashing the unbridled potential of the collective human imagination. And once capitalism came along to recognize what first seemed like junk, no one wanted the internet. AT&T turned down the internet. They could have had it for like $12. They didn't want it because they how are people going to create value? How are you going to get products? It's just people sharing recipes. It makes no sense, right? But once capitalism came and took over the net, the bias of the whole, the dynamic of the technology shifted from tools for people to explore reality to tools to use on human beings to make them more consistent with capitalism. And this attitude ended up pervading everything from social justice and climate activism to education itself in terms of assessment and outcomes. And the more digital companies came in, the more the assessments were tuned to show the value of digital, digital materials. If you want to see the value of an iMac based or an iPad based curriculum, is look at the iPad based assessment. They're going to be perfectly married. And the problem with that in education and in the fields that I care about too, in terms of activism and social justice, is the attitude that pervades it is this utilitarian understanding of humans. So we keep saying, and even a couple of our speakers already, we can't help it. I say it. Well, how do we get people to ... Right? Once you have that framework, how are we going to get people to? You're instrumentalizing the human. It's not about how do we get people to blank. It's rather how do we develop, or how do we cultivate a landscape that engenders healthy pro-human attitudes and behaviors. It's setting the stage. Any great teacher knows it's setting the stage, creating the conditions for education to happen, the set and setting around education. So I came up with sort of 4 interventions for how to develop these landscapes rather than do things to people. And I talk about them actually in the republication of a book I did 15 years ago, and didn't realize at the time that it was as right as it turned out to be. It was called Program or Be Programmed, and I meant it kind of as a joke. But now that we are living in a digital landscape that is actively programming us, it kind of makes more sense than I meant at the time. But the 4 things I came up with, the first one is to denaturalize power. And that's to be able to do, this is what you would call critical thinking as educators, to distinguish between social constructions and given circumstances of nature, right? There's so many things, like we talk about AI and jobs. Whenever I get interviewed about AI, what about the jobs? What about the jobs? What about the unemployment problem? Well, if I want to denaturalize power, I look and say, why isn't it an unemployment problem? What about the unemployment solution? Who really wants a job? When were jobs invented? Late Middle Ages, when the chartered monopolies came. We used to have small businesses. What are jobs? I don't want a job. I want money. I want to work. I want to create value. But do I want a job? No. So you can look back and denaturalize anything. Jobs, central currency. And once you've denaturalized power, these institutions like that, it does the second thing I'm asking for, which is to trigger agency, to help people realize that they have the ability to reprogram reality in the ways that they want to, that we're in a read-write reality, not a read-only reality. And once you've triggered people's agency, then the next thing that naturally emerges is they want to socialize. They want to do it together. None of us can do this alone. So how do we engender rapport and solidarity? How do we re-socialize the people so that instead of, buying a minimum viable product drill at Home Depot to make one hole in the wall and then stick it in the garage for a year until it doesn't work anymore, how do we help people summon the courage to knock on their neighbor's door and say, Bob, can I borrow your drill? And then once they're borrowing and playing and lending, they're going to it allows for the collective behaviors that do the 4th thing I'm asking for, which is to cultivate awe. And awe is very different from sort of digital vertigo or isolated virtual reality excitement. Real awe comes from realizing that you're connected to something bigger than yourself. It's more of it's not a digital sensibility of connection so much as a mycelial sensibility of connection, that we're all each other's doulas, helping metabolize what we're all going through. So at its best, I think what Bildung does is it helps us recognize and experience the liminal, right? The in-between, this place between the data points as valid and real, and the place of action where all life and consciousness actually exist. And in those in-between spaces are where we find what makes the human human.